What happened to Paul's ship after the captain didn't remain at Fair Havens in Crete? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Acts on walking through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing Acts chapter 27, verses 13 to 26. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Acts chapter 27, verse 13. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Acts chapter 27, beginning at verse 13. When the south wind blew softly, supposing that they had obtained their desire putting out to sea, they sailed close by Crete. But not long after, a tempestuous headwind arose called Euroclyton. So when the ship was caught and could not head into the wind, we let her drive. And running under the shelter of an island called Clauda, we secured the skiff with difficulty. When they had taken it on board, they used cables to undergird the ship, and fearing lest they should run aground on the Syrtis sands, they struck sail, and so were driven. And because we were exceedingly tempest-tossed, the next day they lightened the ship. On the third day we threw the ship's tackle overboard with our own hands. Now when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest beat on us, all hope that we would be saved was finally given up. But after long abstinence from food, then Paul stood in the midst of them and said, Men, you should have listened to me, and not have sailed from Crete, and incurred this disaster and loss. And now I urge you to take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For there stood by me this night an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I serve, saying, Do not be afraid, Paul, you must be brought before Caesar. And indeed God has granted you all those who sail with you. Therefore take heart, men, for I believe God that it will be just as it was told me. However, we must run aground on a certain island. Paul is on his journey from Palestine to Rome, still a prisoner, but on his way to appeal to Caesar for his release. Winter was fast approaching, meaning that it would be dangerous to sail on the Mediterranean Sea, the quickest way to Rome, especially using the ships available in that day and age. They had come to the island of Crete in the Mediterranean with great difficulties, which should have been a sign for them to stop. However, the city that they stopped at first in Crete was known as Fair Havens. It really wasn't ideal to winter in, as the ship would not have had a great place to anchor. The captain of the ship, against Paul's advice, decided that he would like to travel about 64 kilometers or 40 miles west of Phoenix on the island of Crete, where there were better conditions for the ship to winter in. And according to verse 13, at the beginning of the voyage, a calm south wind seemed to indicate that they would be able to make the short journey. They decided to sail close to the island in the hopes that would protect them from the weather. However, once out on the journey, a tempestuous headwind arose called Euroclyton. This cyclonic tempestuous wind is well known in the Mediterranean in the fall and the winter, which is why it is not safe to sail during the winter season, for this storm can begin seemingly out of nowhere. And of course, without modern meteorology, there probably would have been very few signs that they were even in danger until it was too late. The wind was so strong that they couldn't sail into it, but rather had to let it send the ship in whatever direction the wind was blowing from. A small island about 37 kilometers or 23 miles southwest of Crete, called Clauda or Cauda, depending on your translation, was able to be used as protection, but only for a short while as they passed it. The ancients on ships like these would tow a small vessel behind the ship for their own safety in case the larger ship was damaged. The New King James calls this a skiff, and it is this vessel that with great difficulty the crew saved. Once the vessel was on board, what the crew did was try to strengthen the whole ship by passing cables or strong ropes around it in order to keep the planks from springing because of the wind and the sea. That's how bad this wind was. It could have very easily destroyed the ship without the ship running aground. The other problem, though, was the wind was tossing the ship to and fro, and so nobody knew which direction they were going. The danger of not knowing which direction they were going was, of course, they also didn't know if there was any dangers in the way. Off the north coast of Africa, between Carthage and Cyrene, there were two dangerous sandbanks or shoals called the Syrtis sands. Mariners would obviously try to avoid these, as those sandbanks could have destroyed their ship. But alas, in this storm, they were at the mercy of the wind. The one thing they could do in this regard, though, was to lower the sails. The effect of doing this would be to maintain the balance of the boat and ease the pressure on the helm, meaning they could steer the ship easier, even in the fierce wind. But of course, the storm didn't stop, and so the next thing to do was the next day to lighten the ship, meaning throwing cargo overboard. Even that wasn't enough, and so on the third day, they threw some of the unnecessary tackle or furniture of the ship in order to save the ship. Such was the cost of trying to make what was seemingly a short journey to a more convenient port, the loss of the things of value on that ship. Now, even though the original storm eventually passed, that didn't mean that things got exponentially better. For many days, they went about not seeing the sun or the stars, that, of course, which was necessary for navigation, and the wind beat on the ship as well, probably from all directions, meaning that they had no idea where they were or where they were going. And then add to that they had gone without food, and you can easily see that all hope from the crew was lost. However, the Apostle Paul was on that ship. In verse 21, he stands up and tells them that he was right and that they should have listened to him and not sailed from Crete. He said that not to gloat, for what good would that do? Instead, he said that in order that they might heed his words that he was about to say. For an angel of God had said that Paul would indeed stand before Caesar, meaning that not only he, but those on board this ship would be saved. Paul's faith in God assured him that this was true, and he implored those listening to him to believe as well. Now, just because they were going to be saved doesn't mean that there still wasn't trouble ahead, for there was. Paul revealed that they were going to run aground on some island, meaning that the ship was going to be damaged and lost. But they would be alive, which is the most important part. That Paul's faith in God never wavered, even in these worst of times, not only is a credit to Paul, but is an example for us to follow in tough times today. We'll continue with this, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Acts chapter 27, verses 27 to 38, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.